Hello and welcome to Tutorial CU. My name is Yannick, and in this video I will give you a brief introduction into Razor Pages. So if you know about ASP.NET Core MVC, or if you have never created a single application in ASP.NET yet, stick around until the end of the video to understand how you can use Razor Pages to create web applications. Now let's get started. If we open up Visual Studio and we simply go ahead and search for ASP, let's do that. We can find several templates, right? And that one here, ASP.NET Core Web App, is a template that includes Razor Pages. Now, we also for sure have an empty one and we have an MVC one. That one is definitely also very famous, right? So you have that folder which is called Views, Models and Controllers, and inside there you have all the related C# files. Now, a lot of people are also using Razor Pages, and we wanted to make this video for everyone out there who is interested in Razor Pages or who is now facing an application developed in Razor Pages and wants to understand what's going on. So let's create an application from scratch. Let me just hit next here. Let me just call that Tutorial CU. Pick .NET 7. We don't use any authentication right now, and let's create the app. Awesome, there we go. So this is our project, and let's take a look at the template structure that we have right here. So we have a program.cs file where a lot of our application's configuration takes place. So we, for example, have a service container where we can add new services like database context and all of that to our dependency injection. You can also see that we have here add Razor Pages registered. Nothing too special going on here, and it's not really related to Razor Pages. So let's skip that, because that's the same as in every other ASP application. Now, we also have an app settings JSON, and now the main difference comes, we don't have an MVC folder, so we don't have a model folder, view folder, controller folder. No, instead we have one folder which is called Pages, and inside there we have so-called page models. So let's open up that folder and let's take a look at the index.cshtml right here. You can see that we have some HTML, or well, some CSHTML, which is Razor syntax for sure going on, and we have an attribute which is called, or decorator which is called @page, which indicates that this CSHTML document is literally a Razor page. Also, we are binding a model. We are binding the index model, which we will take a look at right now, and then we have some other simple HTML elements right here. So what's that index model? Let's just open it up. Now I want to show you where I can find it. If you take a look at the pages again, you can see that index.cshtml has a drop-down menu. So let's open it up, and here you can see the index.cshtml.cs file. So there is another C# file which is related to that CSHTML file, right? Now let's take a look here. We can see the name now, index model, and it's inherited from the page model. And the page model is offering a lot of MVC functionality. So let's take a look. Let me just hit F12, that takes a second. And now if I just open up that here, you can see bad request again, you can see forbid, you can see local redirect, we got partial and all of that. So a lot of MVC stuff is going on, which we can also use in Razor Pages, right? Great. So now, as you can see, we also have a constructor here, which allows us to grab, well, injected services from the dependency injection. And if you have no clue about dependency injection, make sure to check out our video only on that topic in ASP.NET Core, because it's super important. Well, it's popping up right now at the top right corner. Also, make sure to subscribe to our channel so that you no longer miss any upcoming videos. And if you are serious about your C# career, check out our C# Progress Academy. It's a unique self-paced course that teaches you ASP.NET Core for full stack development with Angular, test-driven development, and C# design patterns. I'm absolutely sure that this is the fastest way on how you can progress as a C# developer, and we offer a 14-day money-back guarantee. So if you are not fully satisfied, you can simply get your money back, no questions asked. So go ahead, check out our C# Progress Academy and become a developer that can bring true value to the table. Now, if we start our application, we will just see some default styling as you know it from the MVC template, right? Or even if you don't know it, that's why I'm showing it right now, because maybe you have no clue about the MVC template, right? So let's just give it a second to load. Yep, and there we go. This is the, well, default template. We got a home page, which we are at right now, which is also called the index page. and we have a privacy page right here. And now we want to extend that. We just want to give it some functionality so that you understand how the Razor pages are working. We want to be able to add persons and to display them. Now, the thing is that we for sure, let me just close that here, that we don't have a database, right? So later in this video, we're going to add entity framework in memory just to store the information about the people that we are creating for the lifetime of the application, so that we can really see changes when we load and reload pages and all of that, but we will get to that. So one last thing about this page right here. We have a method which is called onGet. Well, guess what? This method is getting executed in the moment where we send a request to this URL. So this index right here, it's our index page, right? So the URL is just slash, but let's just assume it would be slash index. As soon as you send a get request to the slash index URL, the onGet method will get executed. And the same applies for the onPost method and the onPut method, and there are several others. So if I send a post request to the index page right here, then a method which is called public void onPost, like that, would get executed. Just for you to understand how this is working. For sure, a browser, when we type in, let's say Google, right? So www.google.com, in that moment we are sending a get request and we are getting the actual page layout from Google, for example, right? Great, so this is why it's called onGet. It's not just only because, yeah, oh, I want to get the page content. No, it is because it's related to the real HTTP requests. Okay, so now let's get started. Let's create a new folder. Let's call that models. So let's add a new folder here. Let's call it models. And inside there, I want to create a new class, which is called person. Now, I want to make this video as exciting as possible and also as short as possible. So I will now create a class and see you in a second. Okay, there we go. This is our class. We got 3 properties. First of all, the class is called person, and we got 3 properties: int ID, string name, and int age. So I chose to take an int ID for entity framework later on, so that we also directly, well, immediately have a primary key, right? But it's not really necessary. But for sure, in any real-world application, you want to have a unique identifier for your entities. So having an ID is definitely a good practice. Now, next up, let's create our first page for those people. So I want to go to pages. I want to right-click on pages. I want to add a new Razor page, and I want to call it people. So I want to pick an empty one. Now, let me hit add. Now I can select the name. I want to call it people, and the .cshtml will get attached automatically. Now, what we can see here again is the add page decorator. So it's Razor page, and we are binding it to a people model class, which we can see right here. Now, as you can tell, if we have our people.cshtml right here, we now have again that code behind file, that people.cshtml.cs. Now let me open it up here. You can see people model again. Now inside here we get an onGet automatically provided, which is quite fine. Now let me just close everything else here, which is not necessary right now, just so that you can see which files are open right now. Awesome. So let's try to first of all navigate to that page. So if we open up that shared folder, which is inside of the pages folder, we will see a layout.cshtml. Let's open that up. If we scroll down, we can see the nav bar at the very top, which is getting displayed. So here we got home and privacy. Let me just open that up. Let me copy it over, and let me say /persons, /people, I'm sorry. And let's say people. Now if I save that, it will redirect to the ASP page with the name people, and our page is called people. So this is why this is working. Now I want to show that real quick. So here we got our project, and I can see people now. If I click on that, I will get to the people endpoint, and right now I'm sending a get request, right? So the onGet already got invoked, it already got executed, but unfortunately there is no content inside it, right? So nothing is happening. Now if we want to display something, let's say we want to display some people, we want to make use of some data binding. But first of all, if I go to that people.cshtml and I want to show some content here, let's say h1 for example, and I want to say people, that's no problem, right? As soon as I start the application, you will now see an h1 showing people. So if I again navigate to people, you can see that H1 here. So that's not the problem. As I already said, inside of that CSHTML, we can write razor syntax, right? So we can add for each loops here and all of that. We will get to that in a second. Awesome. So now inside of our people model here, I want to be able to add a new person and I want to show a list of all existing people. Right now we have none and we need to store them. So we will now include entity framework in memory database. Then we will take care of a form to create a new person. Then we will save it to the entity framework database. And afterwards we will take care of displaying the list of all the existing person records in our in-memory database, right? So let's move to tools. I mean, it sounds like we're doing a lot, but it's not really a lot. So it shouldn't take too long. NuGet package manager here. Let's manage the packages. We need to install 2 of them. The first one is for sure entity framework core, first of all, right? So that we get access to the database context class and all of that. So let's select it, let's hit install. And the second one is the, entity framework core in memory database provider. So entity framework core.inmemory, search for that. And here we got it, Microsoft entity framework core.inmemory. I also want to install that. Let me just scroll down here. Let me hit install. Awesome. So basically this allows us to create a database context. We also created, other videos on that topic. We also have an introduction into entity framework, which is popping up right now. So take a look at that if you have absolutely no clue about entity framework. But it's basically an ORM, an object relational mapper, and it makes it super easy for you to, get access from C# to any kind of database. Now, we don't want to use an SQL database or no SQL database right now. We only want to use an in-memory database because it's super easy to set up. Great. So if you are a little bit familiar with Entity Framework Core, you know that we need a database context, right? So inside of our models folder, let me add a new class. To be honest, this is not really specific right now to Razor pages, but I always want to make sure that you get as much as a real-world scenario as possible and that you always get, as much knowledge as possible from our videos. So please go ahead and try to follow along or just watch the video and follow along later or whatever. But I'm absolutely sure that you will learn something new every time you watch our videos to the very end. Now I want to call that MyDB context. It's not the best name maybe, but that doesn't matter too much. The fact is that we need to have any kind of context that we can register in our DIs, in our dependency injection, right? So public class MyDB context, and we want to inherit that from DB context class. Now he doesn't know that yet because we are not using the correct namespace. So let's just wait a second, show potential fixes, use Microsoft Entity Framework Core. Awesome. And now we can add a property here, a table, right? That should be really easy to understand. So let's add a prop here, public db set. As I said, it's just, think of it like a SQL table. What data do we want to have in our database? We want to have person there, and we want to call that table people. Awesome. So we are nearly done, where we need to create the protected override void, which is called onConfiguring. And inside there, we need to provide the DB context options builder. There we go. Let me just zoom out a little bit. And inside that onConfiguring, there we can really set up our in-memory. So what we want to do is we want to take that builder. I want to show it again, and I want to just make that a little bit smaller here. Options builder, I want to take that one, and I want to just write down memory, right? And you can see use in-memory database. We want to take that, and we can simply provide any name. Let's say MyDB. It doesn't really matter because the database is only existing during runtime. So as soon as you shut down the application, your in-memory database is gone for sure. Awesome. So that's basically all we have to do from that side. Now just register that database context in program.cs so that it gets injected or that it gets provided for our application. So builder.services. And just write down context. Let's see what we get. You can see add DB context, right? He wants to have a type, and our type is called MyDB context, the class that we have just created. Now we have added it to the container and we're done. So we have now entirely connected in memory database, which is awesome. Cool. Now let me close that. Now that's set, let's move to the people model. How can we get access to our database? Well, we make use of dependency injection. Let's create a private read-only MyDB context. Let's call it context with an underscore. let's create a constructor because we are getting, or we are grabbing the injected elements from the DI using the constructor, as you can see it right here. So let's just do it exactly that way. My DB context, that's provided from the dependency injection here, that one. Awesome, and we're just assigning it to our private read-only MyDB context right here so that we can access it in the entire class. Awesome. Now for onGet, we could now simply say that we take everything from our context.people and show them, but so far we don't have some. So let's just stop here for a second, and now let's switch over to creating our first person. So if we want to create a person, we need any kind of property to bind to. So since we know that we want to create a person, it also works with primitive types, so let's say simple strings or whatever, but our person class is for sure a more complex type. We, however, take the bind property attribute that you can see right here. Now we create the property of type person, what we want to create, and let's call it new person. So this is now bound to our cshtml file. I will get to that in a second. Let's create a public iAction result. I will explain why we take that iAction result in a couple of seconds or minutes. Let's say on post and then return redirect to page. There we go, redirect to page. And that will basically just redirect to the onGet again, right? So we take iAction result because if we want to return to another page, we have to take that. If we don't pick iAction result but void instead, we are not able to return and redirect to another page. Just saying. Now let's switch over to our HTML. So here we got our people. Now let's create a new form. And guess what? That form is for submitting data. And we want to set the method of that form to post. Great. Now let's create any kind of input. It could be a button or whatever. Let's add a button here. Let's simply say button, let's call it add, and important enough, we need to set the type to submit so that it submits the form. So I don't want to care too much about styling. We got Bootstrap implemented automatically, so you can for sure use any kind of Bootstrap class if you want, but I don't want to, well, blow up the code just to make it look nice in the end, because it's really more about what's going on here in Razor Pages, not about the styling, right? Okay, we know that we have three properties, ID, age, and name. So let's create our inputs for that accordingly. So input, there we go. And the first input is for our ID. So what I want to do is I want to set the type to number. Since our ID is an integer, I want to set it to number. And very important, I want to bind it using the name attribute that we have right here, and I want to bind it to name is equals to ID. So that's the name of our property, right? Now I want to copy that over 2 more times. Now for the second one, it is text because this is for the name. So this is really like the property name of our class, of our person class. Now input type number again for age. Great, so now let's see all of that in action. Let's just try to add that to our database. So the values will now be stored in the new person. And this is because we added the bind property. So ID, name, and age will get assigned to the properties of our bound object, which is that new person here. So what we can do is we can simply go ahead and say, hey, context, which is our database context, right? .people.add, we want to add something and we want to add our new person. So there we go, new person, it's the property at the top, right? And always make sure in Entity Framework Core to save the changes once you modified your database. Awesome. Now this is saving, right? Great. Let's just take a look at that. Let's just start the application and let me just set a breakpoint here in line 31. Now let's hit run. If we now switch to our people side right here, you can now see that we have a form. Well, it's for ID, it's for name, and it's for age. Now let's hit add. Our breakpoint should stop the application now. There we go. Now let's simply hover above new person. Let me just open it up and you can see age 30, ID 1, name Yannick. So now we have successfully verified that our binding works properly. So let me just close that application again. Entity framework did not complain about our context, so that one is working fine. It's configured in the correct way. Now for onGet, we now want to, well, basically repeat the stuff, but the other way around. So let's again think what we want to do. We want to show a table of all the people in our database. So we want to show a table, right? Now, inside of that table, we have a list of people. So let's create another property. Let's write down prop. Let's create a list of people. So the information that we really want to show on our site. Not a list of people, list of person. I'm sorry, list of person, right? And now let's call that list people. There we go. Now we can definitely initialize that. So let's say it's a new list of person. Now let's scroll down. In onGet, what we want to do is we want to set the value. So our people list is equals to the context, our database context, the people table dot to list. So all the records that we have stored in our database, right? Great. So every time you send an onGet request, we will assign all the people that we have in our database to that property because it's a list, right? Keep that in mind. Now let's switch over to our people.cshtml again. So this is for creating something, and right here we want to create a table. Now I just want to use one single bootstrap class, which is called table, which really it makes it look so much better. So I want to use that, and inside the table we got a t-head. Inside that table we have as a sibling a t-body. Inside that t-head we have a tr, which is a table row. And inside that table row we have a th, which is a table, well, a heading. You can see that in a second. It's our ID. Let me just copy that over 3 times or 2 times. So there we go. I will just adjust the formatting in a second. So we got ID, we got name, and we got age. Awesome. If you want to adjust the formatting or correct it, Control K and D. Okay, so that's our table head. Awesome. Inside of our table body, now the magic happens. So we want to create a row for each person. So what we want to do is we want to create a for each loop, right? So let's write down add for each because it's Razor syntax. Let's say var person. Oh, no, let's make it easy to read. Let's say person in model.people. There we go. Now, what is model? Let's take a look again. Model, so you can see that right here, is our people model. And then we got model.people. So let's go inside of our people model again, right? People model, there we go. And here we got our people list. So this is what we are referring to. Now, he doesn't know person because it's outside in a different namespace. So let's show potential fixes using tutorial CU model. Now for each person, we want to create a table row, as I said. Inside that table row, we got table data. So I want to create table data, and I want to put in the value for person dot, and I want to put in the value for @person dot ID, name, and age for sure. Make sure if you are in Razor syntax and you are referring to a C# object like person here, make sure to use that @ sign. If not, it's just plain text and it will just get rendered as, well, plain HTML. So @person name and @person age. Great. Let's take a look. Let's start our application one more time. So here we got our application. Let's move to people. You can see that table here. ID, name, and age. Let's create something. ID 1. Let's say Yannick. Let's say age 30. Let's hit add. You can see our breakpoint is stopping. That's fine. I can just remove it. I can hit on continue. You can now see our record got added, and afterwards we redirected to the same page so that the onGet will get called again, which then updates our list, right? So that we can see the latest records that we have added. Now, I want to add the second one. Now, we're using Entity Framework, so ID is our primary key, so so make sure that you don't use one again because it will, well, create a conflict. So second, let's add Dennis, for example. Let's set age to 34, whatever. Let's hit add here. You can see again, we are adding something, and afterwards, once we really saved something to our context, we redirect again to reload the page to get all the latest information from the database and to show it here. Awesome, and that's basically, well, the introduction into Razor Pages. I hope it makes stuff a lot clearer for you now if you were struggling. So yeah, Razor Pages is also very cool and a lot of people use it. And if this video helped you out, give it a thumb up. Write down into the comment section if you want to learn more and know more about Razor pages. Subscribe to our channel and definitely check out our C# Progress Academy if you're interested in becoming a highly demanded and sought after C# full stack web developer. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.